It's Monday, and we're kicking off your week with some wonderful happy hour content. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, and the Flex Zone podcast continuing, bringing in the illustrious guests. We do it yet again as we break into the vault. We're going to take a look at the film, look at the Ravens off-season needs as the combine is over and free agent is less than 2 weeks away. It's the Flex Zone. Got a very special guest. I think you'll love what he has to say. I'll tell you all about it and who it is. But if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that bell. We are inching closer to the 3K mark. Once again, as always, it's the Flex Zone Podcast. Monday, happy hour, Ravens talk. Let's get to it. Only place giving you sports how you want it, when you need it. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy Monday. You've made it through another week and the start of another great week here on the Flex Zone Podcast. Only place giving you sports how you want it, when you need it. Very special happy hour edition of the podcast. We got a very, very special guest. You know him. You love him. You've heard him on your airways. You've seen him on the various interweb sites, social media, and, of course, his website. He's going to tell you all about it. But joining us for the first time so graciously on today, fitting us into his busy schedule, is 105.7 The Fan's film study analyst, the man who created the website Baltimore filmstudybaltimore.com, the one and only Ken McKusik. You've heard him, you know him, you love him. Welcome him into the Flex Zone Palace. Put your hands together. Mr. McKusik, thank you for joining us here on the Flex Zone. Welcome in, sir.
Hi, Byron. How you doing?
I'm great, sir. How you doing, man? Thank you for joining me. Let the people know. Let's get to it. For those who don't know who you are, Mr. McKusik, let the people know what you do, who you are, and how they can keep up with what you got going on.
Sure. My name's Ken McKusik, as you mentioned. I have a website, filmstudybaltimore.com. I started writing about football about 20 years ago, and I do a lot of fairly detailed analysis of defense and offensive line in particular. But the website, the regular offense and defensive podcasts are fairly well known. I do a show called Friday Morning GM that comes out, not surprisingly, on Friday. We do a couple of matchup shows and a total of 9 pods per week.
So let's get into it, Mr. McKusik. Obviously, we know how the season ended in Buffalo. What can you, from a film perspective, because I always want to know, what is it that is causing the Ravens to beat themselves? It's usually self-inflicted wounds, self-inflicted penalties, miscues, things that are inexplicably never happening. They seem to happen in the worst moments. What can you attribute to that? Is there anything you're seeing on film? Is this team undisciplined? How are you feeling when you hear that type of question?
Well, it's nothing you can really put your hands on. It's the one thing about when teams turn the ball over, they tends to be because they're trailing or because they're in a bad situation in a game. And if you look at the situations, whether it's the Tennessee game in 2019 or this last Buffalo game, I mean, it's primarily an issue with trailing in the game led to turnovers. Not necessarily directly, but when you're trailing, you try and do more desperate things to catch up. The Ravens in the game against Buffalo dominated the game. You get to the end of it, and you just wonder how the hell they lose this football game. after they've dominated so much in terms of they passed the ball effectively, they ran the ball effectively, their play balance was fantastic in terms of run and pass. I only have one minor beef with how they approached the clock management of the last few minutes of the game, where they scored too quickly. But other than that, I mean, I don't really have a problem with anything that happened in the game other than the turnovers. And if you're might be too young, Byron, but in 2000 they won a playoff game at Tennessee, very similar circumstances. That Tennessee just had big advantages in terms of moving the football. I think the Ravens only had 5 first downs in that game, and they won anyway 24-10 on the combination of a blocked field goal return, 90 yards for a touchdown, and Ray Lewis's 52-yard or 50-yard interception return that ended up sealing the game. So it does happen. It's happened not just to the Ravens, it's happened for the Ravens as well in the past in their history. But it's been a very frustrating component of the Jackson era. This was not a time where Lamar really was centrally at fault. He had a small amount of responsibility for this one, but he played very well in general. It's mostly Mark Andrews was the issue in this game, because he had both the fumble and the drop on the 2-point conversion. So frustrating as hell. But I don't think it says a lot about the future, honestly. The Ravens have been one of the best teams in the National Football League the last 2 years, and I expect them to be that again in 2025.
I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of Ravens fans see doom and gloom and always see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is going to be potentially the best team on paper, health permitting, and I know we'll get into the particulars of what could happen and what could be added. What did you see from Lamar Jackson? Obviously, MVP caliber season, however you feel about that decision. His improvement, I say it all the time, he's not throwing the ball anymore. He's passing the football. He's going through his progressions, the improvement in the deep ball, and just his ability to have command of the Todd Monken offense.
Yeah, I think the biggest change for me was outstanding both pre and post snap reads from Lamar. So we said, one of the things to look for, he went up to the line of scrimmage. He strolled around the line of scrimmage. Whether he's talking to himself or he's talking to the rest of the offense, he's certainly moving people around. He's taking the time to really soak in what the defense is setting up to do. And then post snap, he was terrific. I mean, he doesn't make mistakes with the football. He very much is safe with it, almost to a degree that is unhealthy, perhaps, because he really is not an on schedule thrower, and that takes away from some of the great route running on this team. In particular, Bateman has been a guy who's lost. A little bit of his value hasn't been realized, even though he had a great year this year. A little bit of his value hasn't been realized because Lamar's not an on-schedule thrower. So he waits for the break, and then he throws when he sees somebody breaking open. That really works for him because it's a great extended play quarterback characteristic.
We got to talk about Mark Andrews. What did you see out of Mark Andrews in that game? Because I know a lot of Ravens fans are up in arms. They want to get rid of him. They want to trade him. They want to do this. They want to do that. And a lot of people are taking this Eric DeCosta quote that he said at the Combine as kind of a bit adieu to Mark Andrews. I didn't interpret that. I was live watching it. I just looked at it as they were giving him his flowers. They wanted to kind of stand behind him in a rough time. And I think the man had 11 touchdowns. You don't want to lose that, right?
Well, it was the second highest ever percentage of touchdowns as a percentage of targets in Ravens history. And that's something you don't want to throw away. The only guy who ever had more, Mark Ingram in 2019 had 5 and only on 29 targets. Andrews had 11 on 60 some, I think it was, but it was up over 15% in terms of touchdowns as a percentage of targets. He had a great year. I mean, honestly, in a lot of ways, the Ravens use the tight end less these days than they did before Monken, which is, I know it surprises some people, but they use them much more effectively. So the last 2 years combined, they've had 143.5 passer rating throwing to the tight ends with 30 touchdowns and only 1 interception. It's off the charts, quality of targets that they've had the last couple of years, but it's in a lot fewer targets. And so I think it was 138 this last year in total targets, which is low. And that could maybe increase again. But as far as where Andrews will be next year, there's 4 legitimate options, and I think it's still possible any of them could happen. The one is that he is traded, which I think is probably the most likely of the 4. He could be cut, and that'll only be as a last resort if the Ravens can't find any trade partner at any price. And I don't anticipate that'll happen because at $11 million, Mark is still a value to some team. And I would think a real good value if you have a young quarterback, for example, you want a real sure-handed receiver you want to put him with. Andrews would be an excellent choice. He could be kept on the roster for this year only, which I think is a little bit less likely. I think the Ravens want to save on the cap, so I don't think that's the most likely thing. Or he could be extended. And so all of those are possible. A lot of an extension would come down to whether or not the Ravens are able to make a deal with Lamar Jackson to extend his contract. So that was the interesting part of the conversation from that combine to me was DaCosta saying basically, I'm going down to visit Lamar. We need to get his input on this coming year. That's not what he's really going about. He's going down to see Lamar because he wants to ask Lamar to extend the contract. And part of that discussion will be, hey, do you want Mark Andrews back next year? Because one way we can do that is if we can have Mark, if you'll extend your contract, it'll provide some cap space for us to sign both Andrews and potentially likely to extensions as well and maintain this great tight end core you have.
What did you see with Derrick Henry this year, whether in the film? We know he takes great care of his body, but I think a lot of credit has to be given to, unfortunately, we did lose Joe D, but George Warhop coming in, developing this offensive line along with the other coaches, Harbaugh as well. I think the development of this coaching staff, especially on the offensive line with having a guy like Derrick Henry, was like a hand-in-glove fit, Mr. McKusik.
Yeah, he's a fantastic match for Lamar, period. Lamar has improved every single running back who's come in here. And Derrick Henry also a beneficiary of that, just having the read option and the mesh point between Lamar and Derrick Henry ended up being the most powerful weapon in football. It really, from the very first week, that was apparent in some ways. Lamar had the big game, of course, against the Chiefs, but that's because they were respecting Henry more. And that's something I think is lost on people sometimes. The other team will dictate who's going to have the big game between Lamar and Derrick Henry because it's who the defensive ends are crashing on is where the read is not going to go. Okay, so Lamar is going to give the ball if the defensive ends are crashing on him, and Lamar is going to keep the ball if the defensive ends are crashing on the running back. And a lot of teams decided they would play assignment football this year, free up Jackson the runner, and he's back up to 915 yards this year. Which means they have to get very careful with their assignment of football and switching an inside linebacker to the outside. Even when you do that, they've still got to tackle Lamar Jackson in space, and that's a real difficult thing to do. So that mesh point between the two of them and the threat of the read option, even if they don't actually go to the mesh point, how it facilitates play action, how it facilitates the passing game, what they have to do to try and stop it, is one of the really great weapons there is in the entire game.
Well, Ken, all these insiders and people who are close to the team are saying a deal is imminent for Ronnie Stanley. A deal is imminent for Ronnie Stanley. It's on the way. DaCosta seemed confident. Harbaugh seemed confident. I am not one of those confident people, but we've seen it before last year with Matabike, 2 years ago. Obviously, they're bringing Derrick Henry. What are they going to do to, like you said, maybe extend Ronnie Stanley? Because he's looking at, what, 20+ million a year, I'm guessing?
I would have said probably 20, 21 million. I think that my feeling was that Alaric Jackson was going to sign for maybe about 22 to 22.5 million. Alaric Jackson has a weird unknown suspension on his record where the NFL set him aside for 2 games, and they've never announced what that was for. It's a violation of personal conduct policy, but they haven't announced any more than that. So it might be something that's just like embarrassing, or they didn't want anybody to know, and the Rams and he and the NFL have all kept it quiet. Or it might be something that's worse than that we don't really know, and the Ravens might have been a no on it anyway if it had any domestic violence component to it. But whatever the case may be, Alaric Jackson, I would have thought would have been more money than Ronnie Stanley, and he signed for 19 million. I think Ronnie Stanley could probably be done at 20 million now, would be my guess.
Okay, good. So interesting. Do
you
see the re-signing happening imminently, like in the next few weeks with everything coming up?
I think if it doesn't happen in the next 9 days, if it doesn't happen before 3/12, and we're recording this in the afternoon of 3/3, then I think that it's unlikely that he'll be back. I think it's much less likely that he'll be back. If it will mean something has gone wrong with the negotiations that he can't be back.
2 others real quick on the offense, McCary and Ricard. They want to bring back Ricard, obviously, for what they like to do offensively. Do you see maybe that is a situation they bring back Stanley where McCary is then maybe sought after someone else who can play multiple positions and maybe a little cheaper?
I'm sure McCary would be gone if Stanley's back. McCary represents a fairly substantial cap investment if they bring him back. I thought that they needed to bring back two of Jones, Stanley, and McCary, but one of them has to be Jones because he's the cheap one. So hopefully they'll get him back. I think McCary is probably gone. They've got another option at left guard waiting in the wings in Voorhees. I think they could use a draft. They could find another guard and at least have a backup for 2025. But they have options as far as that goes. Off left tackle, they don't really have an option, and I don't think Rosengarten. Okay, in terms of how I viewed it, he got help so often. It's very hard to look at his grade and say that grade is really meaningful. So I grade snap by snap offensive line play, and he comes out scoring pretty well for the season. In fact, better than Stanley slightly. But the problem is he's got so much help. It's hard to really say that should really count the same way Stanley, who is consistently on an island, his grade would be. Stanley honestly had about a C+ season this year. It wasn't bad. It's worth a good amount of money, but it's not worth a great amount of money. He had some penalties. He gives up a lot of pressure, and he gives up more pressure as I score it than PFF does because the cone gets impeded more, the passing cone, where he's I'll explain it if you want me to, but anyway, there's too much proximity between his guy and Lamar for how I score offensive line play. But if he, that's something that he and Lamar have been very good about negotiating the pass. Lamar does not have a problem with bump pressure from the backside, and Stanley has a very good mirror, and his basic philosophy is to give ground in exchange for maintaining that mirror. And Lamar's worked very well with that over the years, leaves the pocket, happily, doesn't lose his focus down the field. And so that's worked well for them. So in particular, I think Stanley's probably more valuable to the Ravens than another team.
Definitely, Lamar is throwing under duress a lot. We see it a lot, Mr. McKusik. Yes, even if we ain't watching the cones or whatever, we see it's a couple of guys in his face, and we're like, "Get rid of the ball," and he makes a spectacular play. But let's look at Jaguars' defense going into year two. You're bringing Chuck Pagano. The DP's kind of fading into the shadows. Pass rush, pass rush, pass rush. What are we going to do at pass rush, Mr. McKusik? We know they are number 2 in sacks. We know they led the league in sacks. We know they get pressure. We know Owe had double-digit sacks. But in crucial situations, in closing time, and in win rate, I'm sure you'll tell me about that, they don't test out the best. What can they do? What are they going to do? And what do you see on the film defensively? Because I think that is the biggest issue that they had last season.
It's a highly scheme-based pass rush, and it's a very, very conservative pass rush in terms of numbers. So having a conservative pass rush in terms of numbers is typically going to result in lower pass rush win rates because you're not putting the other team under pressure. Right now, I'm working on a project to look at the 2000 Ravens defense again. I've done that over the years several times, but this is another time that I really wanted to look at it and re-evaluate it using my current pass rush analysis methods. And they got after the quarterback in some unbelievably aggressive ways back in 2000. This defense, they're just not willing to do it. They'd have to put the back end at risk. They'd have to rush more than 4 a lot. And to give you an idea, the 2024 Ravens rushed the quarterback with more than 4 only 19% of the time. The 2000 Ravens rushed the quarterback with more than 4 30% of the time. And there's another dimension to that. The Ravens' amount of stunts per play was probably twice as high in 2000. They stunted play after play after play. They didn't really respect a lot of the quarterbacks they faced. That was part of it. But they were just remarkably aggressive. And Marvin Lewis had a very wide variation by play in terms of how many he'd send on the pass rush. We could see some of that creep in as being a difference in the way Orr looks at the game. But I think he had Dean Pease sitting over his shoulder this last year. Dean Pease was also a very conservative pass rush guy. Those are so far the 2 most conservative guys the Ravens have ever had in that department.
What did you see with the improvement that they did make moving Kyle Hamilton to the back end? But it seems like they want to move Kyle Hamilton maybe back to some of that rover position. He plays some nickel, plays some dime, rushes the passer, can play back. But could they be looking at, and maybe you can throw some names at me, I know there are a lot of prospects at safety, Malachi Starks, the gentleman from South Carolina. I know you mentioned some names you were tweeting out. Anybody that stood out to you maybe defensively from the combine or what they could add?
Yeah, there's definitely guys. First of all, I think you're 100% right that they'd love to have at least the possibility of moving Hamilton around the field to big nickel on a lot of plays, to dime. I think dime would really cover up for the weak side linebacker weakness a lot. I mean, first of all, your dime is on your highest leverage plays, so you really want to have a good weak side linebacker on those plays. And Hamilton was really given that. And in the past, when they've had great defenses, 2000 Ravens had Corey Harris to do it. The 2019 Ravens had Chuck Clark doing it. The 2018 Ravens had Anthony Levine doing it. Those are some of the great dime back years in Ravens history. When you have a second inside linebacker on the field, and the Ravens had Patrick Queen out there, Patrick Queen will make an occasional splash play and get a sack, but he generally was hurting the Ravens in terms of being out there on passing downs. And that I think the Ravens would like to be back to a weak side linebacker, dime backer rotation, where early downs you have a weak side linebacker. In terms of guys, you mentioned coming out of college this year, Imanwari is the best, and he tested the best, off the charts with a 10 RAS score. He backs that up with incredible credentials in terms of college, in terms of his coverage. And I just looked at this today. This is like 5.3 yards per target and a 37-ish passer rating against. Just to give you an idea, 39.6 means every pass was thrown incomplete against you. So 37 means he had to score on the interception column and also have ridiculously low, other dimensions of his coverage. So he's fantastic. And like Wiggins last year, he completely matches his physical traits in terms of what his coverage statistics are. The second guy I would say, the guy I like best, is Watts out of Notre Dame, Xavier Watts. He also has tremendous coverage statistics. He's a pure free safety. He'll be cheaper in the draft. Makes a lot more sense for the Ravens. I'd love for them to get him in the second round. I don't think he'd be a real value at 27, but I think he could, if he were in the middle of the second round, I think that'd be the sweet spot for him. Means the Ravens would need to trade up to get him from where they are, probably up to 45. I would say be a great position. And then the third guy who's getting a lot of notation, but I don't like as much, is Malachi Starks. He's given up 8.7 yards per target in his college career. Great tackler. It's not what the Ravens need. They don't need a real strong safety type to come up and run fit. They need a guy who can play the back end. And, the Ravens have three extraordinarily versatile safety/slot corner types right now in Humphrey, Washington, and Hamilton. They don't need another one like that. They need a free safety. That's what they need.
Speaking of that, how do you see the defensive back room looking? We know Wiggins. We know Marlon had a career year. He's going to have to get his money restructured. Speaking of money, and how do you feel about Ardarius Washington maybe moving, if they get a safety, to maybe corner again? And how do you feel about a guy like TJ Tampa? I liked him last year. I know he didn't run the best, but he has that ability maybe even to play some safety or corner.
Yeah, I would keep Tampa at corner, where the room is fairly short. I mean, he's built like the aircraft carrier corners they like, meaning is fairly long and tall. I would want that. I think right now he looks like he'll be the third corner. It could be the fourth, depending on whether Tre'Davious White is back or not. I think Tre'Davious White would still be a pretty good signing for the Ravens at this point because of the depth. Humphrey is a guy who will move to safety at some point on his next contract. I don't know exactly when, but it could be sooner rather than later. It could be sooner than we think. After the year he had, that move is coming. I don't know exactly when, but it's coming. In terms of the slot corner, they have lots of options. So I don't think they should go after a slot corner at all. Specifically, I'd avoid those physical traits in the draft because they have Washington, Humphrey, and Hamilton, who they can all put there. And just as an aside, slot corners are easy to find. They're like relievers in baseball. It's the starting pitchers of the outside corners. They're the ones that are really difficult to find. Do I have a problem with Washington moving back to slot? No, I wouldn't. But I think that the first guy that they need to move back out of the back end is probably Hamilton. Hamilton, close to the line of scrimmage, is, as I say, at the ace of trump. When he's back off the line of scrimmage, he's still a valuable player, but he's dropped to like a queen of hearts or something. It was great to have him replacing the two of clubs last year when he did. Very important for the team, but he's a much more impactful player closer to the line of scrimmage.
Got to ask you about the elephant in the room. What's going to happen at kicker? Obviously, even before this whole fiasco with all that was going on, it was obvious they probably were going to bring in competition, I would think. I have not seen a kicker that I love in this draft. Obviously, you watched the film more than me. Is there anybody that we can maybe hang our hat on to in those wonderful plethora of mid-round picks that the Ravens seem to hoard more than you see on A&E television?
Yeah, I don't think there's not anybody I know of specifically who's a great candidate to bring in, but that doesn't mean there isn't one. There probably is. I just don't know who it is. So Randy Brown was involved in picking Tucker out of Texas. They got him undrafted, so that's terrific. Let's hope they can do that again. He's outstanding. He's the guy you want on this team. They'll get the kicking situation right. They'll get the holding situation right again if they have to move on from Jordan Stout as well. And this actually, it could be a clean house Wolfpack year because probably Stout will stay for the fourth year of his rookie deal, just because the Ravens will want to save money and he's already signed, and there's not a good reason to cut him. He's still pretty cheap, and he's been okay as a holder. We saw some of the decline in Tucker. I don't really blame on Stout, but in particular this last year, I think it was probably Tucker trying to overkick and ending up a lot of wide left. I don't think that was Stout, but anyway, it may be time to move on from Jordan Stout as well. So they might do it all in 1 year, and if they did, it's going to be quite a rebuilding project to make sure all those pieces are working again.
Let some of the listeners or viewers know, because I've seen this disparity, and they even mentioned it: kick returners and punt returners. We know we got Keaton Mitchell, you got guys like Justice Hill, kick returners, but a punt returner, it's a different set of skills and a different set of things you have to deal with before you even catch the ball. And we've seen the Ravens this past year was just terrible. I don't know what they were doing. Could they maybe find a guy? I know people want them to go out and get a receiver, whatever. I don't really think they need one, but could they maybe find a guy that could be a returner type in the draft?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's lots of guys. Every college team has a punt returner and kickoff returner. So there's plenty of guys out there who could do it. They have, the question is, what other is that guy going to do for you? Is he going to be a receiver who's also a punt returner? Is he going to be is he going to return kicks and be a running back? And that is typically the way of it. You tend to get more running back types are on the kick return team, and more wide receivers on the punt return team. And there's a big major difference, obviously, is the punt return team. You have to be able to go further to catch the ball in the air. You have to have better judgment, and you can't miss as often. If you're returning kickoffs, it's not good to drop the football, but if you do drop the football, it's not the end of the world, because the other team can't even start until you've actually touched the football. So you're not generally going to fumble on a kickoff, but some of the judgment we saw in terms of the punt returns, particularly at the end of the year, was getting pretty frustrating, I think, for everybody, in terms of, Sims had his bad moments in terms of letting some balls go, in terms of not being able to secure the ball. Wallace, I think, failed to secure 2 balls in a game. So they had a variety of problems. And yeah, I would expect them to try and address that. I think the question is, do they get a cornerback who can also return punts, or do they get a running back who can do it, or they get a wide receiver, whatever it might be?
A real quick Maryland guy, I want to throw this in there. Ty Felton, because I do cover Maryland. We cover Maryland here also. Ran very well. I think he showed out well in the combine. Where do you see him maybe falling or going in the draft? I know they had him, Dante Trader, I believe, as well, was there. Any of the Maryland guys that stand out to you or that did well?
Honestly, I haven't scouted them specifically, so I don't think I'd be of use to you in terms of
Okay.
making.
I could just see
predictions about
Ty
it.
Felton with the Ravens, Mr. McKusik, because he can return kicks and he has speed. I'm just throwing it out there. He won't be a first round pick, may not even be a second round pick, but he plays well. When you put on the tape, I'd be intrigued to see what you think of him. But I was just wondering about that. Do you think they keep all 11 picks? All 11?
Perhaps. I mean, it's not like they don't have use for 11 players, or they don't want to take shots on 11 guys that they like. They may decide there aren't people towards the back end they don't like. Oftentimes, if you have 11 picks, and most of the Ravens are backloaded in the 6th and 7th rounds, I think they have 5 picks in the last 2 rounds. It's not like there's a lot of value there. So it's not. I heard somebody trying to tell me today that the Ravens could trade up to number 20 or whatnot. They can't. They really don't have the horses for that. They traded every single pick they had in the entire draft. They'd only get somewhere between the 10th and 11th pick in the draft. So it's not like they can get a lot of value for what they have. They're stuck with less value, but I think that DeCosta will make the best use he can of those, and they'll pick some guys they like. One thing they may do this year is find the next Patrick Ricard. So they may decide that, hey, we're going to take a shot on a defensive lineman, pick him, and then we'll try and craft him into the player we want. It may even take more than a year. He may even start on the practice squad. They may take a risk on cutting the guy, and then they bring him up and do it. So they've got some options in terms of what they do at the end. I didn't really like what they did at the end of the draft this last year from rounds 5 on. Didn't really like they drafted Rasheen Ali. They drafted Leary, the quarterback. They drafted Sanusi Kane, who's worked out okay, but he's not really a back end safety. So he's really a dime back or nothing. And he's a special teams guy. So, I mean, there were worse players in the NFL by far, but Sanusi Kane he's not an exciting 6th or 7th round pick. He's a 7 in his case. They drafted the guy who never got on the field, Samak, the center. So I didn't really like what they did in the later rounds this last year, but hopefully they'll have better luck this year and pick some guys that we like a little better.
All right, Mr. McKusik, I didn't take too much of your time already. I got one more for you, and this is just me throwing it out there. We've seen Eric DeCosta make some big moves. He'll make one all offseason. We've seen the Derrick Henry move last year. He's even made some trades. What do you see happening, and who could fit the bill if they were to sign a big name free agent or a solid winning piece, as I like to call it? Or do they make a trade? I know people are throwing all types of names out there. We saw Deebo Samuel go for a 5. We know Cooper Kupp's out there. We've heard, I believe, Keenan Allen linked to the Ravens. You even brought up, I believe, with the weak side linebacker on your side, Isaiah Simmons, some other guys. So throw some names out of free agents and maybe a guy they could go after if they wanted to be, I guess, a little risque and try to trade, which all the fans want to fantasy and do on GM mode.
Okay, so I'm really not a fan of trading draft capital for players. So I don't see that. How you doing, Coach? I see you out there. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of that. But I do like the idea of having a signing their in-house guys. I got distracted a little bit here. So they have a number of players they need to make early decisions on that will accrue value for the team. So let's go through the various players. They have Isaiah Likely. Now, honestly, Isaiah Likely could end up either way, and I really hate the notion of Isaiah Likely being traded. But if they can't extend Isaiah Likely now, they may flip and they may re-sign Andrews, which means they're really going with an older player. I don't like that. And then they might re-sign him, and they trade Likely, who has a lot more trade value than Andrews prior to his 4th year. Travis Jones, enormous re-signing that they need to get. So he's a guy you want to make sure you bring back here. The 3rd year, Tyler Linderbaum, Kyle Hamilton. Tyler Linderbaum, there's a funky thing going on. They can't afford his 5th-year option because it's $23.4 million. It's lumped in there with all other offensive linemen. So rather than pay that, they've got to get him re-signed prior to May 2nd when they would otherwise have to offer that tag. If they don't, they won't offer them the tag. This is my prediction. That's not necessarily what the Ravens will do. And he'll just go in without the 5th-year guaranteed, and they'll have to try and then sign him before the season. But as soon as you go into the season and week by week, time passes, very likely they end up losing Tyler Linderbaum towards the end of the year. His agent is going to want him to try and hit the open market, and that's probably what will end up happening if he gets to, say, midseason and he hasn't been signed for next year. So I'd like that to get done, and there's actually less urgency with Hamilton. It's interesting enough because his 5th-year option is perfectly affordable at $18 million and change. He's a bargain at that price, so it doesn't create the same kind of impetus for the Ravens to make that signing. With Linderbaum, 23.4 is a number, and I expect he'll make something like $17 million per year on his next deal over the course of 4 years.
Mr. McKusik, you're the best, man. I appreciate you yet again. If you would like to let the people know, how can they keep up with you with all of your wonderful film study and analysis?
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Byron. I'm at Film Study Ravens on Twitter. And if you want to look at the website, it's filmstudybaltimore.com. We're doing 2 things right now. We have a show where we have UFAs. The UFA, anybody out there, you're welcome. Just hit me up DM on Twitter if you'd like to be on the show and advocate for your favorite unrestricted free agent. That also goes for trades if you have a specific trade you have in mind. That'll be going on for a while, and I'd love to have some new people on.
Hey, I might have to send you a few options. I don't know who's realistically on, but we'll make that happen, Mr. McKusik. Thank you again. We got to do this maybe after the draft, kind of see what went right, what went wrong, maybe some of those prospects, and get your ability to break down where you see the impact could be with the Ravens.
Sounds good, Byron.
Thank you again, everybody. Give it up for the one and only Kim McKusik, Film Study Ravens, filmstudybaltimore.com. Mr. McKusik, thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep up the great work, and we look forward to do this again real soon. Make sure everyone you go follow Mr. McKusik at Film Study Ravens. Thanks again, Mr. McKusik.
Take it easy, Byron.
Yes, sir. You too. Once again, give it up for the one and only Ken McKusik joining me today here on the Flex Zone podcast for a little afternoon happy hour Ravens talk, as the legal tampering period and free agency is literally next week. I appreciate everybody in the chat. I've seen all of you showing love. Alex, what is going on? Nathan, what's going on? JT, Javi, Eddie, Roger, I see you. Macklin, Gibson, Miss Queen, DJ Ray, Ace, Eric, what is going on? In the clutch, number one fan. Nelson, what is up? Clay, of course, Roger, Ezekiel, Alex, as always. I saw Coach Evans in the building. Shout out to Coach Evans from Sip the Tally. We got my boy Trey. What's up, Trey Dez? Got Ray Nico Howard. I just want to show all you guys love. I know it's work hours, so everyone is doing what they're doing. So I wanted to come on here, get some film talk. As we mentioned, Ronnie Stanley could be potentially making even more affordable contract with the Larry Jackson with the Rams move. So those are interesting. Some safety news, some guys, maybe a Xavier Watts at the end of the first round out of Notre Dame. So a lot of ways they could go here, maybe some extensions in the works, maybe some trades, some options to create some cap relief. Eric DaCosta going down to Florida to create cap relief, to tell Lamar Jackson, hey, we're going to give you some money up front. Give us some money on the back end. Do you want Andrews back? What happens with Andrews? What happens with, like I said, the rest of the offensive line and the free agents, and things that could happen defensively? He mentioned Isaiah Simmons today, weak side linebacker, could play along. Roquan Smith has the speed, has the athleticism, could be an option. What do they do with the secondary? What do they do at the cornerback position? So a lot of ways that the Ravens could go. And as always, I appreciate and welcome all of our new subscribers who are getting ready to get out of here. Yes, I did see that they released Ray Phoenix from Guantanamo Bay. It's been released. So the Lucha Brothers, I'm going to say it now, you'll get Lucha Brothers at Mania, maybe against Peter. All right, you heard it here first. So we'll get probably Lucha Brothers against the New Hill New Day. Remember, they took out Rey Mysterio, so maybe they could defend his honor. So maybe we'll get that. But I'm getting ready to get out of here. It's happy hour. We'll be back. We got a lot of content on the channel. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for subscribing. This is the Flex Zone Podcast, your place for Ravens. We do Commanders content. We do NFL content, NBA content, professional wrestling. What a weekend it was. John Cena turned heel. We got the Monday Night Raw live stream coming tonight, 8 p.m., 7 p.m. Central. If you haven't already, hit that bell, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Let us know what you're looking forward to. And tonight, after Monday Night Raw, about 10:30, we have the Flagship Podcast, episode 480. Well, episode 480 is tonight. We got 481 next week, but episode 480 tonight. The only place giving you sports how you want it when you need it. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up, hit that like button, hit that bell. We appreciate, once again, big ups to Kim McKusik, Film Study Baltimore. Hey, Rage, what's going on? Appreciate you being here. Everybody show some love to Raging Girl Gamer. Go ahead over to her channel, show her some love, as she always does here with the Flex Zone Podcast. And check her out. You know, shout out to you, Coach Evans. I'm going to be emailing you, brother. We're going to be hopefully having you on real soon to talk a little Ravens. Shout out to Sip the Tally, everybody in the chat joining me. I know some of you are at work, some of you are sneaking away to watch, so I appreciate it. And this is the place, giving you sports how you want it, when you need it. We'll be live tonight for Monday Night Raw and for episode 480 of the podcast. Once again, go check out Kim McKusik's, his work, his wonderful work at filmstudybaltimore.com. And we hit 3K. We hit 3K. We have hit 3K. We hit 3K. Thank you, Rage. Thank you, Alex. I saw Alex's message. We did hit 3K. So big shout out to everybody in the chat for tuning in, showing love. We got a lot of Ravens content coming up, a lot of live streams. We now will be live on Sundays throughout the offseason, talking about the biggest news. We saw Darius Slay was released today. So we'll talk about some of that stuff tonight. And we'll get into some of the NBA talk as well. Luka and the Lakers with LeBron, number 2 in the West. A lot to get into. This is your home for all the sports each and every day. Live streams, debates, and all of that here. Twitter, Instagram, The Flex Zone 1, Facebook, The Flex Zone 1, and TikTok, The Flex Zone Podcast. Check us out. Let us know what you want to hear from us, any videos, anything like that as well. I'm going to get out of here. We'll see you tonight for Monday Night Raw. Thank you guys for 3,000 subscribers. We genuinely appreciate it from the bottom of our heart, Flex Zone family. We're nothing without you, so we thank you. You'd be doing anything else in the world, but you're watching us, and we appreciate you contributing to our growth, and we'll continuing making that great content for you guys and giving you sports how you want it when you need it. I'm getting out of here. It's happy hour somewhere. We'll be back for Raw later and the flagship podcast, episode 480 later on. Thank you for watching. God's favorite host. Hit the like button. Vote on a poll. Let me know what you want to see the Ravens do next and how you feeling about the offseason. Any free agents you want, trades, anything like that, as we get ready to get out of here. And we'll see you tonight for Monday Night Raw. This is the Flex Zone Podcast. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it. Thank you all again for 3,000 subscribers. The grind does not stop. We'll keep rocking, keep rolling here on the Flex Zone. We got great guests, great things coming up for you, so we're looking forward to it, and we'll keep you posted on any Ravens news that comes out in the next few weeks as well. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great Monday. Peace. Thank you for watching.